Yo, what is going on, guys? Matt here with a brand new video, and today I wanted to take a look at the best gear loadouts to possibly run in DayZ 1.15 and beyond. So for today's video, I do want to break it down into 3 different tiers just to make it a little bit easier. The first tier is when you're on the coast, you're fresh spawn, you don't have much on you. Second tier is your mid game, where you're kind of mid map, you're trying to figure out what you want to do and where you want to go to get everything that you need. Third tier is your end game. Now for our first tier, we are starting off on the beach, you're fresh spawn, you don't have much. You're going into the first town you see, and what are you going to grab? What are you going to get for clothing wise? How are you looking on food? Now at this point on, most people would just grab the first little dirt bike helmet they see, maybe a jacket, and dip. But there's actually a lot of decent items you get on the coast nowadays, especially now they've added the contaminated zones, which if you do spawn near one, run as fast as you can, far away, don't ever come back to it. But if you do get lucky enough and get a town that has a decent police station, you could try and go there and get a gun. They do spawn a few shotguns. I know they spawn a couple pistols that are pretty decent to use. So all in all, you'd be looking at a pretty good start as long as you can follow this. And there's a few little military tents on the coast. I'm not going to give away any names. You can go look for yourself. But if you know these areas, you will definitely reap all of the rewards that they will have to offer, especially if it's not an area that's, you know, highly traveled, as most people will just try and go to the main bases like the military base in the northern part of the map. Not the northwest airfield, but the one that's up north. I always forget the name of it. So that one, the airfield, of course, and then Tissy. Those are the main 3 that people tend to go towards. But since you are starting off, you're kind of just looking for whatever it takes. If you're lucky, you'll get a scorpion. If not, you'll be stuck with something like a shotgun and a pistol, which is a very good start. You can easily take down almost anything. If you get rubber slugs, you can have a great time handcuffing people and just leaving them there. Clothing wise, your choices don't matter at this moment. Just make sure you have a jacket and some good pants and shoes, so that way you don't freeze to death and get sick, because that will ruin the rest of your playthrough and you will really be angry after that. Same thing food wise, it doesn't really matter, just pick up anything you find as long as it's not moldy. You can just take it all because you will need it, especially if you plan on living for a decent amount of time. Now the mid tier. The mid tier is where everything gets really interesting. So mid tier, this is where you start to get most of your stuff. This is where you will have a really good SMG. You'll be packed on bullets for guns you'll never even find. This is where you'll start to get all the guns and armor that you will really need to make this character be very successful. Food wise, you'll get a lot here as well. The ideal spot where you'll find a lot of this is going to be the Zelengorsk military base that's connected right to the city, literally. Although this is a very hot spot for people, so be aware that you will get into a lot of action here, which can be a really good thing depending on who you are. Your mid-tier can still take you to a bunch of different places as well, so it does depend on what kind of gear you run. Usually when I'm in the mid-tier game, I'm sitting closer in mid-map near Starry and Novi. At this point, you'll be having usually a long-range rifle is what you want, as well as maybe an SMG to go along with it and a melee to back you up at the same time, because you never want to give away your spot, especially since when you hit the mid tier, you'll be the most active, you'll be fighting the most amount of players, you'll see the most action, you'll hear the most gunshots. It's the most hectic time, and it can get pretty crazy if you're pretty undergeared, which more than likely if you're early in this tier, you will be severely undergeared. Usually once you hit mid-tier, this is where you'll start to pick up some military clothing. You'll just kind of pick up whatever you can find. You'll start mismatching. Whatever is closest is what you'll take, and that's not a bad thing. It's perfectly fun. But your character still looks somewhat silly. Not as silly as when you're a fresh spawn, but it still doesn't look quite right. Food-wise, whenever you get to this point, you will need to start actually hunting animals, as the meat on those will be a lot more beneficial than just a can of baked beans or spaghetti or whatever else. So at this point, you will be putting in a lot of work, not just trying to go and find whatever you need gun wise, but you'll also be trying to find a lot of different items to eat. So you'll be packed, stored with fats, steaks, all that good stuff. And around this time is where you start to get pretty heavy with gear, and you'll have to start making choices of what to drop and what to keep, otherwise you'll lose all of your stamina as well. The best weapon loadout I like to use around this time is usually something like an SK if you can find one, which depending on where you're on the map, it's pretty easy to find one. And I'll usually still carry over my Scorpion from when I'm a fresh spawn and just throw a silencer on it to take out zombies from a distance. Yeah, it does draw some extra ones, but sometimes I just don't want to carry the melee, even though I'll have a knife. I try to save the knife just for for cutting animals up. So now you get into that spot as well where you can also use pistols and certain SMGs with suppressors on them to actually work as your melee, which is perfectly fine. But they have changed it since I started doing this a long time ago, to where now even suppressed shots will draw a lot of zombies. So it does kind of suck, but it still works roughly the same. You just have a little bit more to deal with, which it's perfectly fine. Now, lastly is the best one of all 3. It is the end game. The end game in DayZ makes absolutely no sense because the workup and the build up to it, you're grinding, you're trying to get everything that you need. It's a real struggle, and then you get there, you get the AK, the M4, you have a SVD, and now you have absolutely nothing to do with all of this. You can hunt down other high level players, but most of them don't stick around in the higher areas anyways. So the only thing you're really left at this point is to go on the coast and see how long you can last and start over from here and just completely return the cycle back to starting at the coast and then going mid-tier and then endgame again. But the gear when you get here is going to be outstanding. So when you get to endgame, you will have the top-notch quality military gear. You will have the best military clothing, which means you will no longer be stuck wearing hunter's jackets and hunter's pants. You will finally be able to wear your ghillie suit, wear some NBC suits, anything that you absolutely want because the entire selection is yours. Gun-wise, this is going to be the highest quality stuff. You'll find the M4s, the AKs, the VSS. You'll be searching all the crashed helicopters. You'll probably get into the contaminated zone like I was saying. The transition from mid-game to end-game is probably the best part. It's just when you finally get to endgame, that's where everything kind of goes downhill. Once you're at endgame, you won't carry that much food as you'll just kind of revert to just picking up whatever and eating it. You won't be that hungry or thirsty as you'll just kind of eat and drink whatever. Diseases you won't have to worry about too much at this point as well, as you'll probably have stockpiled enough medical supplies to put down a small elephant. So really, there's not much else left for you to do. You've already got all of the best gear. There's no real point in just sitting around waiting at the airfield. You might as well go on the coast, hunt as many people as possible, whether that be fresh spawns or you're killing the guys that kill the fresh spawns. Either way, it works out perfectly fine. At this point, you will have the Alton helmet more than likely. You'll have the skull face mask. I'd still recommend keeping the same thing where you have a ranged weapon and then something short range. At this point, your short range of an SMG will be replaced by an M4 unless you really just prefer the SMGs, which I don't blame you. I do prefer using the SMGs at most points. You won't be touching many shotguns. If you do have a pistol, you're using that as your melee like from the previous one. And that's going to be essentially it. That's just how I tend to play, at least once I hit endgame. I've already got the ranged weapon I need. I'm looking at maybe a Moser or an SK, the same as previous, as there's not too much of a difference in most of the ranged weapons in DayZ. The short range is where things tend to change mostly, as you're going from an SMG to an AR more than likely. If not, you can still stick with the same SMG, but then it'll be the exact same loadout as if you were running a mid-tier. So it does get a little bit confusing, but it's mostly in the clothing and ballistic vests that you are going to end up wearing, things of that nature. And by this point, depending on how you played mid-game, you will either be an absolute tank and you will have no stamina, or you'll have little to no gear on you and you'll be a very quick and speedy boy. But yeah guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I know I didn't touch on melees too much in most of these, as I usually don't use them unless I'm just stuck on the coast. That's usually when I'll use a melee. Otherwise, I'll usually just lock zombies in houses. I don't really pay much attention to them anymore. They're just kind of in the way. But if you are looking for anything with melees, I do recommend the axe, the sledgehammer, and all of the knives. I don't recommend anything else, as it kind of just takes forever to kill them. So those are the main ones you will be looking at if you want to add those into your build. So yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.